On the internet, it's easy to feel like Chuck Norris or James Bond, but as Inga's story showed, that in real life, you will mess up quite quickly.
Hi, I'm Ilya Lozovsky. I'm a writer and senior editor here at OCCRP, and today we're going to be talking about spycraft and espionage. Specifically, we're going to be talking about Russian spies and saboteurs and other agents who are essentially all over Europe. This is a story you may have missed if you were looking at it casually, but over this spring, more and more officials, intelligence agencies, ministers, police forces all over Europe have been warning that Russian agents are amok and they are carrying out acts of sabotage largely aimed at destabilizing Europe's support for Ukraine in Russia's invasion. So these are all really serious incidents. But it turns out there's a very different side to spycraft as well, a much more tragicomic side, you could say. And here at OCCRP, we are fortunate enough to have great colleagues who do reporting on the front lines. And we're going to talk to them about a story they recently published in which they detailed a specific Russian plot that was unmasked by the Latvian authorities. This was a young man tasked with the mission to spy on a NATO airbase, but he wrote down all of his instructions on a piece of paper and then lost that piece of paper in a woman's driveway. So obviously, this is not the world's greatest spy mastermind. And I think that's what's really interesting here, that some of these plots are being carried out by these kind of naive young guys. But why are the Russians using guys like this? And how does this tie into the real serious espionage on European soil that we've been warned about? Is this threat overblown or is it real? That's what we're going to dive in and find out today. And in order to do that, I am joined today by two great colleagues, my two colleagues from OCCRP. One of them is Inga Springe, journalist at Baltica in Latvia. And we also have Holger Roonemaa, a head of investigative team at Delfi in Estonia. So these are two Baltic outlets. This is a husband and wife team, although they prefer for us to discuss the journalism, which of course is what we're going to do today. Hello, Holger and Inga, welcome.
Hi.
Hi, Ilya.
So let's dive right into the cases you recently published, but as an investigative journalist, I'm interested in the sourcing. So first, could you just tell me where you got the information on the cases that you were following?
We got documents from a court because both of these men who were accused, in this case, they both are now in the prison and they will stay there for next couple of years. And it means that the case is finished and we could requested access to the documents. So I went to court archives, sat there for a while, and I read all these documents through.
Let's take it step by step because the story of how this guy was caught was very interesting.
When I read these court documents, it was like reading like a crime novel because the first sheet in these court documents was like the description of this like housewife of a woman who lived not far of the military air base in Latvia. And she was working one day in a garden 2 years ago in May. And then she noticed that a dark car arrives in the drive yard. The young man gets out and she was like going to meet him. But while she already like went to this place, the guy has gone. But on the ground, she found a sheet of paper which he lost. And then she realized that, oh my God, it sounds fishy because it was handwritten note in Latvian language where the man had written like the guest house where he was staying, what he needs to do, what kind of pictures he needs to do, what he needs to say in case someone...
And what was the big mission?
At that particular moment, because he was carrying out other tasks as well, but for that particular moment was to go to the near military airbase and to take photos of these helicopters and equipment. He was also asked to find out where military people are having rest, in which cafeterias they are preferring.
And my favorite detail, there's even a little picture of an airplane. Little kind of looks like a child's drawing.
On the other side of this instruction note, he had drawn by himself with a pencil like an airplane. Yes.
Okay, so this is really amateur stuff because he's essentially going to be spying on a military base in Latvia, obviously very close to Russia. This is a sensitive area where even the locals say, you know, they can't go freely to these places. And he's just written down and lost a piece of paper. Okay, so this woman finds the paper. She goes to the police, right? So they start investigating, obviously, immediately.
Already on the next day, the reaction was very quick. On the next day, there was an investigator talking with this woman. And then, like, I read again these criminal case materials. The first next step, what they did, they went to this car service where he rented the car. But they still didn't know the name because he wasn't like so stupid, we might think. He rented this car on a woman's name, his ex-girlfriend's.
But they knew that he rented from this service because it was written in the note, right?
It was written in the note.
So they followed up on the car, but that led to a dead end because it was someone else's name.
Yes, but on the same note, he had written also, and why he was written all these things, because he wrote also expenses, because he was expected that he will be reimbursed this money, like all his costs. And but what was like this main point, there was also a name of company where he rented a photo camera, Canon.
Okay.
And then the investigators questioned this owner of this shop, and then he was able to show actually his driver's license copy, because he had to leave his document if he wanted to rent out this equipment.
So that's how they traced this guy down, basically from this clue that he had foolishly left on the ground. Okay, so this guy was scoping out a military base. What do we know about him? How old is he, and what does he do?
The guy himself was 21-year-old. He has had some problems a bit with law before, but like nothing so much serious.
And he's a Latvian guy, right?
Yeah, he's a Latvian guy, and he was working in some kind of supermarket selling some stuff for children. But he was changing jobs from all the time, so he wasn't didn't seem like very serious. And he was a guy who was on Telegram looking for a weed, so he liked to smoke.
Okay, so he was using Telegram, the chat service, to find people this is something you can do apparently nowadays, is you can go on Telegram and find somewhere to buy drugs. So he was doing that, and that's how he got ensnared, right? That's how he got connected to his handler.
Yes, he was looking for a weed on Telegram channel, and then a guy, he doesn't know the name, appeared and said, we're looking for someone to do a job. But it wasn't this job. That other job was actually his first task he carried out, and he was asked to find someone who could go to Tallinn. So it's like 5-hour drive from Riga, Latvian capital, to Estonian capital, Tallinn, and draw a graffiti on a wall. He didn't know what kind of graffiti and what kind of wall. And actually, these instructions he found out already on a bus. And on the bus, he also received information that there is also his partner on the bus in a seat number X. So he went and he found out that there is sitting this young guy who looked like a child. And really, when you see the guy's photo, he looks like a small boy.
And he was also recruited through through Telegram?
Yes, he was also through Telegram. But for this child, it wasn't the first task. So
okay, we'll get to that. So the first mission that this guy on Telegram gave him was to go and take this trip.
To go
and
to
do
Tallinn
this graffiti.
And to do this graffiti, yeah.
Okay, and what did the graffiti turn out to be?
And I think maybe now Holger can go and switch, because he investigated this Estonian part.
Okay, now we're in Estonia.
The graffiti, the message on the graffiti was very simple. Killnet hacked you. And the guys...
Killnet hacked you.
Killnet hacked you. Killnet is a Russia-based... hacker activist group, which is basically a DDoS attack for hire gang that presumably as well the Russian intelligence services have been using ever since the start of a war, full-fledged war against Ukraine. And the place where we were tasked to draw the graffiti, it was the perimeter wall of the Estonian Cyber Command headquarters and the NATO Cyber Defense Center that's situated in Tallinn. And then these guys, one night in April, the nights are still dark in Estonia, they walked there. It's close to city center in Tallinn. And they sprayed that three-word graffiti multiple times over 190 meters on the perimeter wall.
And had that facility actually been hacked?
And that's where it gets actually a little bit more serious in Estonian context, that during the same days, there were multiple cyber attacks, very simple DDoS attacks against Estonian state services, like the president's website, the police website, also the NATO Collective Cyber Defense Center's website. But the attacks as such, they were nothing serious. I talked to the main investigator, and he said it's like kids throwing pebbles at your window. But it's annoying. Occasionally, maybe some service or website was offline for a brief time, but they didn't achieve any large impact. but it was the first time when we actually saw that that simultaneously there was a physical message that to show that we were here in Tallinn, and then we hacked you.
Okay, so that's interesting because it just seems so trivial, I guess, and inconsequential. We did have in this, I guess, this character, the kid that you were talking about, who was traveling with him. In a separate case, you told me he was actually hired also on Telegram to do something more serious, which was to go to Ukraine, to Kyiv, and to set on fire a military facility. And this was before the full-scale invasion, right?
During this trip, when they both went to draw this graffiti, this kid told this first guy, this Sergei, his name was Sergei, he was like a bit bragging, but it's not my first job. I was actually doing this job in Kyiv, and it was in January, a month before war actually started. And he was asked, according to his words, like what he was telling that time to Sergei, that it was kind of military building, and he was asked to draw a Molotov cocktail into like a shaft, air conditioning shaft, ventilation shaft.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he did a job sloppy, or he got scared. So there was some kind of small fire, but it wasn't what the people who asked to do it expected. So he actually even wasn't like paid like he was promised he will be paid. But
he didn't complete the mission, basically.
He didn't complete, but these facts already came out a bit later. And again, like you might think like, oh, just young, stupid guys doing something. It's not serious. You see, nothing happened. But it's not so innocent and naive, because these guys were also like tasked and taught how to do and how to hide traces, for example. For example, this kid, let's call him kid, he received in a PDF like instruction, for example, what kind of clothes he needs to wear. That he needs to take 2 pairs of clothes, dark and also like casual ones. In the dark ones, he needs to make this arson, and then he needs to throw them away, and then use casual clothes to take bus to Poland. And on this PDF, he also received instruction how to make Molotov cocktail. He arrived in Kyiv, then he went to the closest gas station, where he actually, I learned how to do Molotov cocktail. I didn't know it's so simple, actually. So he bought this fuel, mixed it up in the correct proportions, and this.
Let's not reveal the recipe here, so we don't get taken
I will not
down.
go in specific proportions, and then he made this like a fire bomb, actually, which is called a Molotov cocktail, and he threw it in.
So there's a couple of more interesting things. So we have a combination of quite serious, arson against a military facility. We have something that seems a little silly, like the graffiti, but it sends a message. And another interesting thing is these guys were not ideological, supporters of Putin or trying to undermine Ukraine, right? These guys were kind of young men.
This is what surprised me as well, because when I started this topic and when I noticed it's actually happening in the Baltics, because we had these cases piling up already and announcing by police it's organized potentially by Russia, I assumed it will be some kind of ideology, I support Putin. But now, at least for these guys, it was only money. It was just a business. If you go a bit step further, like the Latvian guy who recruited and who was coordinated middle person for these stupid young guys who did it actually. And the recruiter, this middle person, was even younger. He was 20 years old. Yeah, this Martins Gritis, he was 20 years old, 19 at that time.
So, and his main job was, if I understand, he was a money launderer, basically, right?
Yeah, he was but he was a coordinator. He was between this Russian side, which we don't know, this guy named Alexander. It's a long chain always, and it's also consciously done, so it's harder to unlock.
Let's just retrace that real quick. So we have Sergei, the guy who dropped the note.
Yeah.
And then we have this middle person who hired him and sent him money. And then that guy is talking to someone else, some mysterious Alexander, right?
Yeah, exactly. For him, it's the option to earn some money because he needed to buy just another weed.
And just to end that chain, we don't actually know the proof that at the end of that chain was the Russian secret services, but that information came from...
So we don't have like a hard factual proof, like documents that Alexander actually was GRU, but Latvian security services are saying, and it also shows in the documents, that they assume it was GRU because it's like GRU.
GRU is the Russian military intelligence agency.
Yeah. Also, because when a prosecutor made indictment, these two main guys, there were two of them were accused in this particular case. They kind of acknowledged that, yes, we did espionage. Indictment was about the that they were doing espionage for Russia. And these guys acknowledged.
They pled guilty.
Yes, yeah, they agreed with this prosecutor's statement.
Okay, so this is an interesting case, and in the sort of, it reminds me of some other cases I've heard of. There was a story of an IKEA warehouse burning down. There's a lot of kind of arson involved in this, and other sort of hooligan-like actions, vandalizing cars and graffiti and things like that. So I guess the kind of larger question that's interesting that arises from this is, why are the Russians interested in carrying out such minor actions? One version I've read, and I'm interested in your opinion, is, according to some security officials, it creates the appearance of random local sort of anti-Ukraine actions or pro-Russian actions, and it creates the illusion that there's a lot of local support for Russia when that, might not be the case. And this is an impression the Russians are trying to achieve. Do you think that's part of the reason?
I think, like when you're burning down an IKEA shop, I'm not sure if it sends a message that the local population is against supporting Ukraine. But in many other instances, that's surely the case. That if you hire crooks off of Telegram to just go and blow up the railway or do some sabotage that's directly related to Ukraine aid, then of course that's the case. In other cases, we can see that the aim is just to sow fear in the society. But if you are able to show that we are operating freely in your countries, in Western countries, we can burn down whatever we want. We can beat up people how we choose. That just causes more concern, more anxiety, and that fear in the society. And that is definitely something that Russia strategically wants to achieve, because the more fear and then concern in Western societies there is, then the more unstable the country and then the governments will be.
Do you think this effect is even felt more strongly where you are in the Baltics, where you're so close to Russia, you are small countries with a large Russian minority, and maybe to someone in Germany or the UK or the United States, it feels more remote? But is this something that's,
I don't think so, actually.
Fear, you think?
I even might think that it's a little bit opposite. Russian secret services have always used the Baltic countries as a sort of test ground. Be it cyber attacks, the first state-organized cyber attacks against another state happened in 2007 against Estonia. That was the first time that's at least publicly known that something like that was done. Be it elaborate propaganda networks, how they try to meddle with our societies. They are used to like trying in these small societies where they feel comfortable operating, because there is quite a considerable Russian ethnic population in our countries as well. And when they see that it works, maybe they change the tactics somehow, they start expanding it to other larger countries. But that also means that we are kind of like inoculated here, that we're used to this stuff going on.
And also what we can see is that these crimes are becoming more and more serious. They started smashed window of the car, like of a journalist or interior minister in Estonia, or just to draw graffiti. But now we can see that they are looking for arson, people who could do the arson cases. Also in these court documents, what I saw that this Alexander, which we don't know who he actually was, he was looking for people who could go to France to burn private houses. I think the problem is that it's very wild, my assumptions, that I think for Russia they would be even more happy if these crimes would be more violent. But it's hard, what we can see from these testimonies, it's hard for them to find people who would actually be ready to commit such kind of crimes with the victims, because this is already like murder. Now you make an arson, like in Latvia they tried to burn Museum of Occupation, which is very historical.
Yes, this is the next example. So let's come to that in 1 minute. I just wanted to end on this IKEA, because it's just, when you see that list and all the other examples, you can Google, you can find easily 2 examples just from this year of at least alleged Russian actions. One of them that stands out is IKEA, just because it seems so not political. And I just want to raise a note of skepticism and just see how you answer this. And when I read about this IKEA fire, I don't think it's been conclusively proven that it was Russian agents. And then you see like local officials raising alarm. And to me, as an American, it reminds me a little bit of the environment after September 11th, when you would have stories like, a shopping mall in the Midwest, says, we are toughening our security because the Islamic terrorists are coming for us. And of course, it's silly to imagine that some random mall in a small city is going to be targeted by terrorists. So there was a certain level of hysteria after September 11th. And a lot of the intelligence agencies, and I should say it's multiple intelligence agencies saying the same thing. We have court cases like the one you've described. But I wonder, is there any chance that this is being blown out of proportion and we're seeing a sort of hysteria and it's much less than it appears to the eye? Or is that something we can rule out?
I think you are partly right, actually, there is a threat that like every arson, there is every fire, there is every like notable person being, I don't know, getting into a fight. There's always the Russia card that you can play, that it's the Russians who did it. And then on the other hand, it's super difficult to actually conclusively prove that was it the GRU, was it the FSB, was it someone else? So it is a lot about like deduction. Or being able to infiltrate the networks super well. Because as Inga was explaining, there are like at least 4 different layers of people already who are in contact with each other on Telegram. And I'm pretty sure that the lowest 3 layers, they don't know anything about like if they are working for the GRU or whoever. They just make the money. But on the other hand, we have talked with a lot of sources as well, and we know about the price list that the Russian services have, and we know that the assassination in Europe is on the price list, for example. So it's not something that we should be able to just ignore.
And we know they've carried out assassinations on Europe.
Yeah, exactly. We can see that day by day, week by week, they are getting more bold, and arrogant, and then taking on new ventures.
Just a small note why maybe I would assume that this IKEA case, which happened in Vilnius, in the capital of Lithuania, it could have been because the guys quite soon, the guilty persons or suspected persons, were arrested in Poland. And this is also one of the strategies that they try to hire people in one country and then send for a task to another job.
It basically makes the police's job harder, right?
Yeah, it makes harder, yeah. But that's why, for example, this graffiti case in Estonia, Latvian police didn't do anything. They didn't charge these guys because our law didn't allow to do it, actually. And specifically because of this case, which changed our criminal law. So now, in the future, we will be able to prosecute people for such kind of crimes.
Okay, and I wanted to get back to this example you mentioned because I think this is actually an interesting, more ideological, political example, and this is about the attack on the Latvian Occupation Museum in Riga. I just want to say I've been to this museum, and it's kind of pretty new, and the exhibit is really powerful. It's a story of basically what happened to Latvia in the 20th century. First, the Nazi German invasion and occupation, then the liberation by the Soviet Union, and of course the main point of this museum is to show that was not a liberation, is to show that was the beginning of years of occupation and so many Latvians, sent to Siberia and killed by the Soviet secret services, and that essentially newly independent Latvia is going to make a statement essentially that we do not accept the Russian occupation any more than we accepted the German occupation. And it's a really powerful museum, although I think the point is clearly political, but that doesn't make it any less powerful. So there was an attack on this museum, actually, and it was, I believe, a Molotov cocktail also that did not succeed in destroying anything, but it could have.
During the night, they smashed the window of the office of the head of museum. It was at night, and they throw in also this Molotov cocktail. And there was a fire, but they had very good this fire protection security system, and there was also a security guard on a place. So they very quickly discovered it, and stopped.
Were able to put it out, then.
Yeah, put it out, and yeah.
And that was the case where the guy was caught, or at least one of them was caught because he left his gloves at the scene, and he was already in a police database, right? Because he was kind of a career criminal.
he had, I don't know particularly what kind of charges, but charges were related to drugs. And there were two men, and according to my sources, I don't know which particularly is the one who did or his partner who helped to commit this crime. He just recently had came out of prison. And also in this case too, the guys were recruited via Telegram channel, and the middle person, again, the one who was coordinating, actually the guy, according to off the record information, but credible source of the record, said that the guy, this middle person, is actually located in a prison in Latvia where phones are not allowed. But of course, secretly people are using in a prison. And he was from prison coordinating this crime. So I hope that maybe after a couple of years I will be able to read court documents and we will see how it actually happened.
And I think this is a great lead-in into the next thing I wanted to ask about, which is about Telegram again, because this is something that pops up again and again in these stories, that there are these young people, these criminals, maybe some are less professional, some are more professional. They're being recruited in Telegram channels. But how do these Telegram channels work? I mean, we mentioned this a little bit earlier, but can you just explain, like, if you're a young Latvian and you want to buy some marijuana, you literally just go on Telegram and search for marijuana, and then you can stumble on something worse?
Yes, that's almost exactly like, for example, here in the Baltic countries, at least in Tallinn, we have stickers, on fences and which have QR codes. You scan the QR code and it takes you automatically to a Telegram channel that sells drugs, whatever, be it weed, be it amphetamine, whatever you want. So it's easy as that. In the old days, you needed to know someone who needed to know someone who needed to know someone, or you needed to know how the dark web really operates. But now you just scan a random QR code on a fence or on a wall of a building, and you will be able to buy drugs fast, quick, and then cheap. And another thing that's how you can get into that community. But we did an experiment at Delfi recently, a month ago. We created a new Telegram account, and we started looking for a job. We created a new profile for us, a local Russian identity, and in less than 24 hours, we were offered jobs for human trafficking, taking refugees who had crossed the Russian border with Latvia into Latvia, taking them to the German border. With exact GPS coordinates how to do it. We were offered jobs for being drug mules or carrying drug money, to become a money launderer. Like in less than 24 hours, we had like many such options. And that's how these networks start to develop as well.
And this is actually how this Martins Griķis, this guy who was middle person in this chain, how he actually met this mysterious Alexander. Because Alexander approached him by saying, oh, there is this crypto, can I use your bank account and then you can cash out the euros or transfer further these euros. This is also...
So they got him in with kind of a different task, with a sort of a money transfer task, and then...
So that's one possibility, but on other Telegram channels there are specific ads and bots that invite you specifically to carry out sabotage acts in Europe. So that's the more hardcore approach.
So this is a completely open channel, this Telegram app, in a way that you used to have to know something. You have to download some crazy browser that I never even figured out how to use to find the dark website. You have to have some inside knowledge. Now it's just completely open. And I just want to also clarify, because I know Telegram is very heavily used, in Russia and Ukraine and Russian-speaking world, but in your countries, does everybody use it?
Not everybody, but it has become much more important in the last 2 years. A lot of people are following, Russian military bloggers, Russian propaganda, and not only because they believe in it, but just to know what's going on. Actually, the significance of Telegram has risen sharply over the last 2 years, and I think that's a real concern from a security point of view as well.
And is it both Russian language and the local Latvian, Lithuanian, Estonian languages, or
no,
just
I
Russian?
think that usually, if not always, it's in Russian language.
Interesting. Okay, well, I wish there's so much more we could discuss. It's very interesting, for example, how crypto payments are used to make all these payments. That's a whole other hour long that we could talk about the use of crypto. But I'll just end this for now with... But first of all, by thanking you for the fascinating story, for your reporting. We'll keep following it. And just tell me, as a last question, what do you find most important about the story that you reported? What is the most important thing for the public to take away from what you found?
My main goal was why I wanted to publish a story, and also why when I requested information, what I mentioned as motivation to state institutions, that we need to warn these people, especially these young people who are ready to do this thing, don't be an idiot. Really, don't be an idiot. It's not just so innocent as it might seem.
Yeah, on the internet it's easy to feel like Chuck Norris or James Bond, but as Inga's story showed, that in real life you will mess up quite quickly, and we know of so many people who have been caught and then who are now doing jail time, not only for doing graffiti on a wall or smashing someone's car, but for actually collaborating with Russia's secret services.
So it's this really interesting kind of two sides that we've captured. You have the very scary professional stuff on a spectrum all the way to just some kids essentially who are maybe initially were just looking to get high, and they ended up in prison because they were collaborating with Russian secret services, which probably they did not intend. So it just goes to show you how, wide the problem is, and how, we talked about Telegram as a channel, and it's much more kind of varied and interesting and kind of weird also sometimes than the top headlines that you see. So thank you for helping us explore this issue. I know you'll keep covering it, and we will keep following the story as well. And thanks again for joining us, and I'll talk to you guys soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye. Thanks for joining us. If you like this conversation, please like and subscribe and leave a comment to let us know your thoughts. We'll see what happens next, and we hope you'll join us. See you next time.